Good evening, colleagues and other fellow professionals. The webinar is about to start in a few minutes. Please stand by.
Dear God, thank you for allowing us today to meet and share our knowledge and time with one another in this webinar. We are truly grateful for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. May you extend your divine wisdom to our speaker so that he would be able to impart effectively his God-given knowledge to all of us. Bless the participants as well so that they would be able to glean the vital information from this activity and spread what we've learned in the spirit of your love and generosity. May we realize that this activity should glorify your name. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, keles na sinamalan, alam ng puso, sa likid mo'y buhay. Lupang inilang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manduduming, di ka masisikin, sa nanagang pulong sa simoy at sa langit pagbabaw, ay ginagang sudyakawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang pagkawat mo'y tagumpay na nagtitingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan ang mahirap titingin. Lumanang araw na walagin pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang higaya ng bangkay mag-aakit, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Before we start this webinar, here are some guidelines for our virtual participants. First, please observe proper webinar and video conferencing etiquette. Also, please change your settings to active speaker view. To do this, go to the view icon of your Zoom console and swipe or select active speaker view. May we also request all participants to turn off their video feed. Do this by turning off the camera icon at the video tab of your Zoom console located at the lower left portion of your screen. You may post your questions through the link flashed in your screen. For those logged into the Zoom platform, you may post your questions through the chat box at the lower portion of your Zoom console. Details on how to get your e-certificates will be flashed at the end of the webinar. This platform and to those viewing through our live streaming and Facebook as well. We expect your adherence to these guidelines. Thank you very much and enjoy learning online. A warm welcome to all our virtual participants. This webinar is brought to you by the Biosecurity Association of the Philippines in collaboration with the Philippine Association. The webinar aims to impart learning insights on how to collect and preserve physical evidence in crime scenes, teach participants on how to protect crime scene responders to wide variety of of biosafety in the field of forensics. Let us all welcome our moderator for this webinar. He is an active BRAP member, a board director of the Philippine Association of Schools of Medical Technology and Public Health, and dean of the College of Medical Technology of Our Lady of Guadalupe Colleges. Ladies and gentlemen, Assistant Professor Mark Raymond Nava.
Wow, thank you very much, Author Reader, for that brief yet hefty introduction. And also thank you so much, Sir Oliver, for that impeccable design of that presentation slide. Truly, you are God's gift to BRAP and PAMIT. Cliche as it may sound, but it is truly a privilege to be this webinar's moderator and to be of service to BRAP and PAMIT. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another worthwhile and interesting virtual seminar brought to you by BRAP, or the Biosecurity Association of the Philippines. This is in cooperation with PAMIT, or the Philippine Association of Medical Technologists Incorporated, with a title, Crime Scene Biosafety, Law Enforcement and First Responders During COVID-19. I would just like to share to everybody na full house. Yes, full house po tayo. Truly, it is overwhelming for us in BRAP and PAMIT to share to everybody that almost 4,000, yes, 4,000 medical technology professionals, biosafety enthusiasts, and even criminology professionals registered for this special event. Unfortunately, as much as we want to, we can only accept the maximum capacity of our video conferencing platform, Zoom, which most of you know, of course, is 1,000 participants. However, for those who are not able to enter the meeting room, we are pleased to share that our webinar is broadcasted worldwide through Facebook Live at the official PAMIT Facebook page. And those who are watching through Facebook Live can also avail of the webinar certificates and also with CPD units. Later, we will share the details. And that is, of course, after the program. So stay tuned. Bawal po maglipat ng channel or rather ng app or ng browser. Without further ado, let us formally start the program with a welcome address from no less the ever-active founding and incumbent president of BRAP, or the Biosecurity Association of the Philippines. With a resounding virtual applause, let us all welcome Dr. Martin Miguel Moreno.
Good evening to our viewers from the Philippines, and hello to all our viewers around the globe. This activity, our 7th BRAP-PAMIT joint webinar, I think is the most attended webinar since we started in May 28. That's almost 4 months ago. Our highest via Zoom at 4,000 plus registrants, and the fast rising viewers on our 2 sites on Facebook, on the BRAP Facebook group and on the PAMIT CPD activities page. We have invited a well-known speaker who will be introduced properly later. I wish to thank in advance all of you who are here from BRAP, PAMIT, the Philippine National Police, and from the Anti-Terrorism Task Force. To our viewers from overseas, I know we will have another fun-filled learning, that is for sure. In behalf of BRAP and our official partner PAMET, I welcome you all to have a fruitful webinar, and as the saying goes, break a leg, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moreno, for that short yet splendid and substantial address. And to give us the opening remarks, let me call on another prime mover of the association, the Vice President of BRAP and also the National President of PAMET, or the Philippine Association of Medical Technologists Incorporated. Let us all welcome Mr. Ronaldo E. Puno.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sir Mark. Good evening, everyone. So on behalf of BRAP and PAMET, allow me to greet all of you in this webinar on crime scene biosafety. And this is indeed a break from our usual biosafety webinars, which normally focus on laboratories. This time around, we will be hearing a different biosafety perspective, a la James Bond, to be delivered by one of PAMET's pride, a woman of substance, a forensic expert, and a medical technologist par excellence, who will be properly introduced later on. And every time she gives a lecture, expect it to be a blockbuster. And tonight is not different. So our sessions for today, though intriguing, is also exciting and worth waiting for. And this is proven by the more than 3,000 registrants that we have. And it only shows that beyond our usual laboratory works, our interests are also triggered by other aspects of biosafety and biosecurity. We will hear about the diverse topic on biosafety as applied in forensics, particularly in crime scene. And we are very glad that we have that despite the difficulty in our situation nowadays as brought about by pandemic, we still find time to further advance our knowledge and skills. And this is a very good indication how committed we are in terms of continuously developing our capabilities. And now more than ever, high degree of professional competence is needed as we fight COVID-19 and as we perform complex laboratory tests, as well as providing services which we want to assure to be safe and secure. Just before I end, I would like to extend our invitation to all of you for the forthcoming Medical Technology Week, which is happening from Monday to Friday next week. Every medical technologist is welcome to join. We have lined up several activities, though most are virtual, and of course by Monday and Tuesday there will be another exciting webinar. It's a webinar series for 2 consecutive days. So that would be a good opportunity again for all of you to enhance and upgrade our skills. So better register early because those who will be registering for the first day will be the same people who will be admitted on the second day. So rest assured that this will be another webinar for the books, and we hope we will learn, and I wish you an enjoy. We wish you that you enjoy every moment of it. So again, good evening to everybody.
Thank you so much, Sir Ronnie, for your opening remarks. Yes, truly, indeed, it is a pleasure to be able to share our leaders and inducers of change. On behalf of our webinar participants, please accept our, of course, sorry for the technical problem. Probably this is because of the many participants that we had. Once again, thank you very much, Sir Ronnie, for your opening remarks. Yes, truly indeed, this is time to be at one with our association and of course a time to be at service to our fellow Filipinos. And once again, we would like to give our profound appreciation to both of you, Dr. Martin Miguel Moreno and Mr. Ronaldo Puno, our leaders and inducers of change. On behalf of our webinar participants, please accept our endless gratitude for always coming up with significant activities. And aside from being significant, of course, let's not forget, it's free. Am I right? Libre po ito lahat. So once again, maraming salamat po to the both of you. And at this point, aside from the webinar guidelines stated earlier, I would just like to also remind our participants and viewers to be cautious. Once again, follow and observe the webinar etiquette. Avoid posting unnecessary messages in the chat box, and also please avoid unnecessary display of your negative attitude. And be respectful towards our organizing committee members, especially when dealing with your individual concerns. All right, let us start the ball rolling. But before the presentation begins, allow me to introduce the star of the night, our guest speaker. Our guest speaker is one of my idol in the medical technology profession. She was born on December 6, 1951 at Sampaloc, Manila. She is a proud wife and a mother to her daughter, Mile. She graduated her BS Zoology and BS Medical Technology at the Far Eastern University, Manila as a partial scholar. She's a registered criminologist and also a registered medical technologist and was number 12 in the board exam. She was also able to finish Masters of Science in Laboratory Management and has undergone various trainings relevant to her practice. And also finished postgraduate studies in forensics and blood spatter from numerous reputable international associations and organizations from the United States and Europe, particularly in Paris, France, and Rome, Italy. She has specialized trainings on blood stain pattern analysis and crime scene reconstruction from Des Moines Police Department in Des Moines, Iowa, USA. A crime scene investigation from the International Law Enforcement Academy in Bangkok, Thailand. She is also an active member of the International Association of Blood Pattern Analysts and the American College of Forensic Examiners International, and of course, PAMET, where she served as the National Secretary and Vice President from 1981 to 1989. She also trained some of the best law enforcers in the country by serving as an instructress for forensic chemistry, toxicology, and forensic medicine at the Philippine National Police Academy or PNPA from 2008 to 2018 and served as instructress in various competencies at the National Police Academy or the National Police College and Curious Christian Colleges Foundation in Magallanes, Cavite. Among her greatest accomplishment is her being instrumental in the inception of SOCO, Scene of the Crime Operatives, one of the most notable news and current affairs program of the former Kapamilya Network. She was also able to write a book on the introduction to forensic chemistry and toxicology, which serves as the reference textbook for the said course under the Philippine National Police Academy. She unfortunately did the forensic analysis on the injuries and bullet wounds of the fallen SAF 44 from the Mama Sapano massacre, most of which, by the way, were her former students in the academy. She was the former chief of the Quezon City Crime Laboratory in the Physical Identification Division, a former regional chief of the Region 13 and Region 10 crime laboratories. Our guest speaker is also a recipient of numerous citations and awards, among which is the most coveted Dr. Alfredo Pio de Roda Excellence Award, given during the 55th Annual PAMET Convention held at the Philippine International Convention Center or PICC in Pasay, Manila. She was also awarded as one of the most outstanding alumnus of the Far Eastern University in the aspect of career achievement, recognized and adjudged by the Philippine Public Safety as Best Guest Professor of the National Police College, received numerous commendations and certifications of appreciation as resource speaker for legal medicine and biological evidence. given by different armed forces of the Philippine units, non-governmental organizations, criminology schools, schools of nursing, and by the Japanese and Korean embassies. She was also given the Award of Merit as the Philippine Constabulary Women's Auxiliary Corps of the Year and later the AFP Women Auxiliary Corps of the Year. She received numerous commendations from the Crime Laboratory as lecturer on blood pattern analysis. She has a total of 18 medalya ng papuri and 12 medalya ng kagalingan and a Presidential Unit Citation Badge. Without further ado, please help me welcome the star of the night, Colonel Filipinas Papa. A round of virtual applause, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for the lengthy introductions. I do not know why Mark gave out all my secrets, especially my age. Okay, now let's start can we do the slides already? So this one is crime scene biosafety, because our law enforcers, they respond, not only the law enforcers, the barangay tano, they are the first responders. And usually the first responders usually are the relatives. Next slide, Mike. Now, we call the law enforcement who approach the scene or investigate as crime scene investigators. Okay. Now, next slide, Mark. Now, why is there a crime scene investigator? Of course, because there is a crime. Now, what is a crime? Crime is anything that is in violation of any legal code or law. So when you commit a crime, whether it be a physical injury or you stab somebody, it is a crime. So you violate the law, then there will be repercussions. Now, when somebody dies or the injury is near fatal, next slide, then the investigators will go to the scene of the crime where it occurred. Now, the crime scene that is responded by the law enforcers should be planned, coordinated, and this is a legal search, so that no one can say, even if let's say it happened in a hotel, the owner of the hotel or the manager of the hotel cannot say, please do not put a police line, please do not do this, please do not, because it happened to me once. You have no authority to dictate on the police because it is a crime scene. So the police will have to take over to locate physical evidence. Now, next slide. Now, what is evidence? Evidence is one that will prove to the court, a factual one, that when it is brought to the court, it will prove whatever is what really occurred in the crime scene. So there is evidence, there are so many evidence, but we will focus on one particular evidence. Next slide, Mark. Now, where does the evidence come from? It comes from people, from objects, or which we call the fomites, or people and object. Okay, so this is the link that occurred in the crime. Okay, next slide. Now, you have the physical evidence, label, biological, factual, and documentation. We cannot discuss all of this, but let us focus on biological evidence because it is biosafety. Because this one is the most biohazard to law enforcement. Okay, Next. Now, there are two types of biological evidence. This one is the one recovered in crime scene or collected by the criminal investigators. So if you recover in the crime scene blood, semen, which is sometimes difficult to locate, fecal material, hair tissue, or the investigator was able to apprehend, so they will get a sample, DNA sample, or the t-shirt of the victim, of the suspect, or the assailant, supposedly. Next slide. Now, have you heard about biological disaster? There is such thing as biological disaster. Biological disaster falls under natural disaster. It refers to a calamity that is caused by exposure of living organism. What we are undergoing now, a pandemic, is a biological disaster. So because we are now experiencing biological disaster, which is similar to floods, you know, but that at least in flood, it would be easy. But there will always be, in any disasters, there will always be death. Next slide. Now, in all of this, we have this Locard's theory. Sir Edmond Locard is a French criminalist. He was the first to establish a crime laboratory. And he said and stated the fact through several experiments that every contact, there is an exchange of evidence. If you yourself, you comb your hair, when you remove the comb, what is stuck in the comb? A strand of hair. That is a physical evidence. So if you stab somebody, so there is an exchange of blood. The blood spatter analyst, which is a highly examination, will determine if you are the suspect or not in the blood, or the hair, or the fibers. There was one bombing wherein the Filipino crime scene in UN, so who was the bomber because of the fiber taken from the pants. It was just the fiber. So we cannot, I cannot explain the detail here because, you know, it's only 1 hour. Next slide. Now, when you enter the crime scene, we have to evaluate. So the police enters the crime scene. Okay. Now, let us evaluate what is happening in progress. So these are the things that the police officer faces as life-threatening to him. You do not know that there is a saying for us as police officers, like, when you step out of the house, you do not know if you are going to go back alive. Now, when you respond to crime scene, there will be the suspect. You will have to determine, is the scene safe? Is the suspect inside? He might be carrying a bomb or a gun. And then the victims might be wounded. Before, usually, you will go to the victim. And how sure are you that the victim does not have any infection? Now, you are also exposed to biochemical hazard, because when you enter the crime scene or infectious disease, you do not know, it's entering the world of unknown. You do not know what is happening in that house. There could be several weapons, or when you click the light, suddenly there is an explosion because the gas is open. So the spark, when you open the light, that's the spark, so it explodes. So these are the things that a law enforcer who responds to crime scene is up and against. Next. Next slide. Now, for the barangay tanods, the barangays who are usually the first responders, because for the police, they have the hazardous pay. Now, for the barangays, we have the Philippine Occupational Safety and Health Standard. Under this, under Rule 1013, what is a hazardous workplace? When you are exposed to a contaminant, a dangerous environmental element, but the number 3 on the next slide, it will say that a hazardous one is when you are exposed to bacteria. Next slide. To a bacteria, to a virus, protozoa, nematodes, so fungi. So masyadong marami. Okay. Next slide. Now, you look at this scene of the crime responder. She or he is taking a picture of the victim. Now, how sure are you that the victim does not have any infectious disease? How sure are you that the victim does not have tuberculosis? Or how sure are you that it does not have Shigella? Shigella is, it's an infection by the bacteria taken from food, infected, contaminated water. Okay, now, next. Now, generally, in the crime scene, the officers, we have a universal rule, which is to wear gloves always. As you can see in the previous picture, that responder, that forensic examiner, is wearing a glove. So she is following the universal rule. Next. Next. Now, you look at this responder. She is wearing a PPE, a personal protective gown. And she has the gloves, she has the mask. But do we do this in the Philippines? No. But now, even today, next please. Now, so for the law enforcement, for the responders, how open do you use the PPE? Or do you practice universal precautions? Remember, we have the universal rule, we have universal precautions. When you say universal rule, it means that that is what is practiced all over the world. So the universal rule is wear gloves, but the universal precaution is you have to wear your protective equipment. Not only the gloves, next slide, not only the gloves, not only the helmet, the goggles, the garment, you should also have the shoe cover. Why? To protect you from injury and infection. So what happens if you have a wound in your body and you are exposed? So unknowingly, most of our police officers are infected. We are not talking about this is a new normal, but this has been happening. There are a lot of forensic examiners who have died because of exposure to hazardous chemicals. Next. Now, so you can see this is what a responder should do, especially when the scene is bloody. Next. Now, so the universal precautions, you have to protect yourself from HIV, the hepatitis B, and other bloodborne pathogens. What are the other bloodborne pathogens? na kayang anuhin na pag may dugo. Kasi pag nakakita tayo ng dugo, sasabihin natin, dugo lang yan. Pero hindi nyo alam, maraming infection ang meron sa dugo. Next. Now, so why do you have to wear the PPE? When you collect body fluid, like what? Semen, serum, fecal material, especially blood. This should be regarded as infectious in all times. Or the PDEA, the transdermal drugs, when they operate a clandestine laboratory, what are they exposed to? They are exposed to the smoke, to the, if they are making drugs, to sulfuric acid, to strong chlorine. So this one exposes everyone, all the responders. So why does, next slide, why does in the Philippines, we do not wear the we do not follow the universal precaution, but we follow only the universal rule. The universal precaution should be followed because this is meant to minimize potential contamination of evidence. So in this scene, there are two things that you should take care of. You have to maintain the integrity of the evidence. Hindi pa nagso-social distancing, ang evidence natin sa crime scene, may social distancing na. You cannot mix two evidence in one container. It should be placed in a paper bag separately. So if you use a swab to collect a blood, this one should have to be dry. You cannot wrap it in plastic because it will have moist, and it is now going to disturb the integrity of the evidence. Wala nang integridad ang ebidensya, and when the evidence loses its integrity, it cannot be accepted in court. So how are you going to prove to court that this is what happens? It's not only the blood, it is the other physical evidence like the knife, the fingerprint, things like that. If you get DNA, it has all to be. And then the number two needed for universal precaution is the safety of the crime scene investigators. How would you feel? There are some investigators that the investigators, they just enter the crime scene. Now, what do they do when they have to poke at other evidence? They use their ball pens to poke at evidence. After that, they don't even try to disinfect it. They'll just put it in their pockets. Did they use shoe cover? So they failed to protect themselves, but they protected the evidence. It cannot be one way. It has to be two-way. This one is both. So what happens if this crime scene investigator who collected the evidence will have to testify? But when the hearing came, he could not testify because he died of infection. That would be sad. So it is very important that we also protect our investigators the same way as we protect the evidence. Next slide. Now, every scene that the investigator entered is a foreign environment. Why foreign? Because you do not know how do these people do their health safety. How do they use their bathroom? When they use the bathroom, do they wash their hands? So if they don't wash their hands, so the bacteria from the bathroom or wherever they went will be in all places in the house. Then the investigator will enter and touch also this thing. So what happens? So they are infected. Complacency. Usually, if you tell them, wear the PPE, mainit yan, wala lang naman yan, yung ganun. So, parang they don't care. They only will care when the time comes when they are feeling difficulty already, when they are getting sick. As first, there will just be a flu or a cold. So, are you protected? Next. Now, look at this crime scene. Is there complacency here? Yes, because the victim is there, and they are all, the investigator, the forensic scientist, are all in one place. Now, if the suspect is there, what do you think will happen? Of course, they will have to check. But what happens there? You look at this one. So this one is complacency, and it is such a small place. Next. Next slide. Now this one, are they, no, next, before. Hindi ba yan? Are they protected? You look at them. One has a globe, the other, they don't have globes. So, nasa basurahan sila. So, ano ang mga bakterya na nasa basurahan? Ano ang mangyayari sa kanila? So, you can see how. You look at their shoes. Is there a shoe cover? Is it covered? Tapos yung shoes na ginamit nila, iuuwi nila sa bahay. So, so yung bakterya nagbi-build up, kaya nagkakaroon ng maraming sakit ang mga kasama niya sa bahay. Okay, next. Now, you look at this. We have recovered a drugs and explosive. So, now you are not supposed to touch your face. You look at that officer there, she's touching her glass, because her eyeglass, because she has to explain to the general what are the explosives all about. So before, the bacteria was not so much. Unlike today, everywhere we live in a world filled with bacteria. As I always say to my people, to people under me, I said, in the laboratory and wherever, even our vehicle are disinfected and clean for every crime scene. And there is an inspection. Why? Because I told them I am a medical technologist, and it will be an insult to me if one of you gets sick or has diarrhea. So everybody, we already follow this infection. Okay, next. Now, what are the bloodborne pathogens? The bloodborne pathogens could be HIV, or next slide. Next, there. The HIV, the hepatitis A, hepatitis B, these are the syphilis. So, paano kayo magkakaroon ng infection? Sa crime scene, pagka merong namatay, or the crime scene is so big and blood is everywhere. So how, remember, you enter a foreign, so how sure are you that the victims are not sick? How sure are you that the victims do not have TB or do not have pneumonia? So why do you have urinary tract infection? Because of the bloodborne pathogens. This one is so, the blood in the crime scene is so important. That's why the responders who will examine the blood, if there is a separation of blood from serum, if there is a separation, it will tell you how long the body has been dead, how long before you have responded. Blood in the crime scene tells you of so many things. It tells you, was the victim shot or was the victim stabbed? if the victim was stabbed, was the suspect right-handed or left-handed? If the where did the suspect go? So you will have to look, or if he is wounded and he escaped, so you have to look for the blood so that you will know where they went. Now, to do that, you have to be very close. Your face will be very close to the blood drops. So remember, you are inhaling whatever bacteria is there. Okay? Now, I remember we responded to one crime scene here in Quezon City, and we would like to take a picture of the scene. So one of my personnel stood on the chair and I said, do not stand on the chair, it is a plastic one. But he did not listen to me. So what happened? As soon as he stood, he went over. And where did he landed? He landed on the pool of blood that is scattered. And it was not fresh blood. The victim was dead for about 3 days. So you can just see how dangerous responding to crime scene is. Next slide. Now, you look at this one. So here, from this one, this is dried blood already, but they are potentially infectious also. So you have to wear PPE here. But by this blood, you will know what happened here. What did they do? So you can see here the wipes. So they were trying to clean the area. That is how important blood is in the crime scene. And blood is one of the biological evidence that is very crucial in solving crime. So, and it is also very crucial to give you a infection. Next slide. Now, you look at this one. Now, this one is a person who was placed on the drum, and when you opened, now you can see that the blood. So you can see the people here, they are just following the universal rule, but there is no universal precaution. Okay, next. Next slide, please. There. Now, you can see that here, there is already a separation of the serum and the blood. So this victim has been dead for quite a while. You will notice that when the crime scene responders arrived, the mother was holding the victim, the child, very close to her. Now, when we arrived at the crime scene, we saw a man whose hands was filled with blood. So we asked him, what happened to you? And he said, I wanted to find out if somebody who killed my child and my wife. So I carried my child. Now, when we arrived, you look at the picture, the photos are documentation. So they will tell you the evidence. So he said, I was carrying my child, but you look, if you remove the child from the mother, and are you going to return it on the same position? You will not. Now, we found an evidence that said otherwise. Next slide. There. You can see there is an encircled yellow. You can see that the child defecated. There is feces. So that is a biological evidence which tells us that the child was never carried by the father. So that itself will tell you, because we investigated, and it will tell you that what happened, how this child died, what happened to all this, it's all because of the blood. But this one, the bloodborne, the pathogens are so active there. Okay, next. Next slide. Now, let's talk about aerosolized pathogen. What is aerosolized pathogen? You know the spray, di ba? Aerosol yon. So this one are the droplets that are smaller and they aerosolized in air and then we inhale it. Okay, next slide para mas malinis ang maintindihan. So, how do you aerosolize particle when you sneeze or you cough, when you speak? Isn't it when there are people who speak with their saliva coming out? So there are big drops. Now these big drops, which is more than 10 micrometer, will just fall down because of gravity. The smaller ones that comes with the droplet will now be streamed in the air. So this one, it will now be airborne. So, and it is less than 10 micrometer. If it drops on the floor. So with that, when the victim who has a, let's say he has TB, and then before, when he was stabbed or when he was shot, he expirated. Naglabas siya, umubos siya, naglabas siya ng dugo. So saan pupunta yon? Sa floor. So may TB bacteria ba doon? Meron, nasa droplet. Dumating yung crime scene responders na walang proper precaution, walang proper protection. So what happens? Now, hand washing, yung nagwawash ka ng kamay, nagtatalsikan yung ano mo, pag nag-flush ka ng toilet, pag nag-brush ka ng teeth. So all of this, kahit pag umiihi kayo sa labas, lalo na yung mga lalaki, na nagtatalsikan, nagkakalat din kayo ng bakterya. Kung meron kayo UTI, so nagkakalat kayo ng bakterya. Okay? Next slide. Now, so you look at this picture. So the small droplets, ano yan? Yung maliliit na droplets. So, makikerry siya sa labas, sa ventilation. Yung mabigat, which is more than 10 micrometer, it will just drop on the ground. Yung iba na na-carry, they could also drop from the ground, pero wala na silang cells. Ano ang nalaglag sa floor? Just the nuclei. So, anong meron ng nuclei? We have the DNA. And remember, virus, they change the DNA. Ganon. So, pag ganyan, yung ganun lang yun. O, next slide. There. Now, so you can see here that the 0.5 microns, it will be in the air, still air, walang hangin. Nandun lang siya. So, gano'n siya katagal dun sa room? 41 hours. Pag lumaki-laki, 12 hours. Ngayon, pag 100 micrometers, magdadrop sa floor ng 5.8 seconds. Pero nandun parang siya. That's why in this time of COVID, we have to wear mask. Para protektado kayo, protektado din yung ibang tao. Especially the police. When you have so many, the law enforcement, you have so many jobs, you juggle your work, you have to protect yourself also. Okay, next slide. There, you look at the sneezing. You look at the figure 1 on the left, then you can see there the airborne. Below it there is the droplet. Now, you look at this person in the middle. When he sneezed on the person. So the bacteria, if ever he has colds or he has flu, it went to that person. So days later, may sakit na rin siya. So you look at this person who is exhaling. So meron siyang airborne, yung maliliit na particles. Pero kasi walang cover. That's why when you sneeze, when you cough, you have to have something to cover your mouth so that the bacteria, you are not going to scatter. So halimbawa mang na-infect. Okay? Next. Next slide. There. Now, you look at this infected person. So, nag-ano na siya, eto na yung nag-sneeze na siya. So, aerosol transmission. Yung iba, maliliit. So, airborne siya. Yung iba, bumaba. So, saan siya kumalat? Kumalat na siya sa environment. So, ano ang protection? You have to wear the mask. You have to wash your hands. Yun yung pinakamura. Then you have to disinfect. Pag ang pinaka is hand washing. Siyempre pamit. Okay. Pero I'm not saying you use safeguard. Now, ano naman ang problema sa toilet flushing? Yung aerosol effect ng toilet flushing. Okay. Kasi pag nagfa-flush, tayo or kayo or anybody, tayo, naka-open ang bowl. Okay? Next slide, Sir Mark. There. So nakita nyo, yung bacteria nakaupo dun sa lid. So you flush, masaya siya. So every time you flush, you close the toilet bowl para yung bacteria hindi lumalabas. Now, I'll show you in the next slide. There. Now, when you flush, the lid is up. So anong mangyayari? Yung water, yung automized water, magtatalsik yan. So dun sa blood spatter, ang spatter in Tagalog is talsik. So let us make, so we have to speak in English, so there is talsication there of the water. So pag flush nyo, hindi nyo kinover, so all the water, hindi nyo nakita yon kasi it's airborne. Now, 20 minutes after the flush, nasa na ang bacteria na galing dun sa toilet flush. Kumalat na siya, di ba? So, anong meron dyan? Meron dyang Streptococcus fecalis, meron dyang Salmonella. Paano kung may sakit yung gumamit niyan? Halimbawa, nagdadiarrhea siya, may food poisoning siya, nandiyan na yan lahat. So you can see, that's why when we flush, we close the lid, wash our hands for 20 seconds. Okay? Next. So, ano yung airborne bacteria na lumalabas doon? Marami. Merong aeruginosa, Pseudomonas, Staphylococcus, meron siyang Aerobacter. So, masyadong marami. So, nag-flush ka because you did not close it. So, yung mga bata, inuubo, mahina ang resistensya because sanay na sila. The bathroom, mabuti sana kung everyday you will have to disinfect your bathroom. Dapat, you just close the lid. Pabayaan mo na lang siya munang mag-flush para yung bacteria na ma-contain, ma-flush. Okay? Next slide. Now, syempre, yung bathroom nyo, doon kayo nagtutoothbrush. Where do you put your toothbrush? So if you flush your toilet with open lid, ang bacteria will transfer to your toothbrush. So your toothbrush should be 6 feet away from the toilet and then you close it. Dapat meron ding cover ang toothbrush. Ganon. So next. So these are the biohazard. Na why did I include toilet flushing? Because usually, hindi naman lahat ng nangyayari sa crime scene nasa bahay, nasa sala, nasa kwarto. We had a crime scene wherein the suspect was inserted in between the toilet bowl and the shower. So nakasiksik siya doon, isiniksik siya doon pagkatapos siyang saksakin. So nung lumabas yun, of course, inano niya na, anong tawag dito, inano na lang nila, then how will you be? You're infected. That is why, tapos ginamit niya yung bathroom, hinawakan niya, hindi rin siya naghugas. Because, you know, kasi ang paghuhugas ng kamay sa atin, not atin. There are some people who finds it funny if you go to the bathroom and then wala naman akong hinawakan sa bathroom. The bathroom is filled with bacteria. Ganon. Okay, next. Next slide. There. I would like to introduce you to some of the words that is used in biological evidence. We have retention. Retention means that the biological evidence should be kept for how long? In our country, we do not keep our biological evidence for long. Why? Because we do not have the evidence retention law. The evidence retention law, let's say a victim, a suspect was falsely accused and circumstances why he was convicted. Now, later on, the evidence, like the DNA, was supposed to be examined. But did we keep the DNA? No, kasi ano na siya, 5 years na, kasi 10 years na, because we do not have the evidence retention law. And then the biological evidence, the safe handling. Biological evidence should be handled using protective equipment always. And how do you package it? It should be the integrity of the evidence per se should be maintained, especially if it is a biological evidence. You should put the hazard sticker outside so that those who will see it will not be contaminated, because if he says, oh, this is a biological evidence and there is no hazard, it was not properly labeled as hazardous, it's blood. Now, that's wrong. Anyway, when you get a blooded shirt, you just don't, and it is wet, you do not fold it. You have to dry it. You do not dry it under the sun. You dry it in itself. You have to air dry it. And you are not supposed to shake the clothes because you are going to distribute or infect the surroundings. Next slide. Now, the chain of custody and tracking. Chain of custody, it means from the person who got the evidence in the crime scene to the evidence custodian in the SOCO team. If it was the investigator, he would give it to the SOCO. And then the SOCO, when he arrives in the laboratory, he will turn it over for analysis. So this one, there is a chain of custody and it is all documented. Now, the disposition. Disposition is, are you going to retain biological evidence or are you going to destroy it? These are the things that are supposed to be taken care of. Next. Next slide. Now, let's say you already had collected so much and you carried, there is a bag of blood that you collected, na-spill nyo, natapon sa laboratory. What do? Do you just wash it with soap and water? No, you have to disinfect it with 10% bleach solution. Bleach is hypochlorite solution, in chlorine. And then you cover it and then for 10 minutes and then you remove it. When you have removed it, and of course, after the bleach, then you wash it thoroughly with soap and water. Pwedeng safeguarding para masaya naman yung aming presidente. Now, when the waste, the biological waste, the things that you have used should be placed in a disposable bag. You do not just throw it together with the other evidence or the other trash, because the biological evidence are biohazardous material. So you will just scatter the bacteria, then it becomes an epidemic. So pag epidemic, pag marami na ang ano, masyado ng mabuti kung localized lang. Okay, next slide. There. So the biohazard, this one should be the labeled for hazardous biological packages para hindi siya hindi makakontaminate ng mga tao or ng mga tao sa laboratory or ng other investigators. Kaya dapat siya properly preserved. Okay? Separated rather. Next. Then, of course, you have the labeling and the signage, and then kailangan may ventilation ang mga tao doon, because you cannot be working in the, this one is already in the laboratory when you bring the biological evidence for examination. Remember, when you go to the crime scene, how sure are you? You look at the picture wherein usually the skinita is so close, walang ventilation. So lahat ng bakterya doon, nahinga nila. Meron ba silang mask? Wala. Dapat ang mask, kasi ang PPE should be differently used. Ang biological, especially if blood is so much, the mask should have a respirator. Ganun yun. Next slide. There. So when you respond to crime scene, you should be wearing this proper PPE to protect you. When you collect evidence, you want to protect the evidence, the integrity of the evidence. How about the investigators, the law enforcement? Are they properly protected? You have to be properly protected. Next slide. Why do you have to be properly protected? So you have the gloves, and you have to have also face protectors, splash goggles. Dapat meron kayo niyan. Kasi baka may tumalsik na dugo. Mamaya pag alis ninyo, may nalaglag, nag-splash yung dugo, nagpunta sa mukha nyo. Eh kung yung isa, pagtalsik, may tumama sa labi nyo, dinalasahan nyo pa yung dugo. O di ba, pwede nyo malaman kung maalat or ano. So, next. And that is very dangerous. And then you have to, when you leave the area, you have to remove your PPE. So there should be your protective clothing. Okay, we said already that dried blood should be handled as infectious. Kahit patay, tuyo na siya, yung bacteria buhay pa rin. Next. So, if while wearing the PPE, you are not supposed to touch your eyes, your nose with your gloves. Kasi yung gloves nyo, hinawak ninyo. This one are for the law enforcers. Next. And even the laboratory. Now, let's say the police cannot wear a disposable gown kasi meron silang belt, may gear, marami silang ano. So this one, their belt and gear, yung suot nila should be disinfected after contact with individual. Halimbawa, next slide, may hinuli sila. Yung hinuli nila is hindi nyo alam if he has a disease or he has an infectious. So you have to disinfect your duty belt, your gear, and then sprayan nyo yan. Tapos, do not shake your clothes. You should have a change of your clothes before you go home or before you go to the office para hindi nyo maikalat yung kung ano man yung nakuha ninyo. Okay? Next slide. there. So let safety be our priority. Quality is the standard because your evidence should have the highest quality for it to be accepted in any court of law. Kahit bali-baligtarin ka, ano yung ebidensya mo. But number one, the law enforcers, the forensic scientists should be safe. Next. Now, so when you do the crime scene, you have to be protected. Well, why? Next slide. Because of the virus. You have to work safely. You have your family waiting for you. Okay? Next. So thank you. That's the end of our there. That's the sunset. Why don't we have evidence retention law? Okay. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you learned a little from that. Pinch out for bigger. Okay. So are there any questions? Wala. Naintindihan niyo lahat.
Thank you very much, Colonel Papa, for that very informative discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Sir Oliver. Once again, that was the star of the night, Colonel Filipinas Papa. And once again, a resounding virtual applause, please, for our webinar speaker. That was indeed information overload. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to the question and
Colonel, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, so
I'm still leaving.
Thank you very much again for that presentation. I think Sir Mark is having connectivity issues. So let's proceed with the Q&A while we wait for Sir Mark to reconnect. First question from the participants that we have. Colonel, should there be a separate budget for PPEs in cases of crime scenes?
Yeah,
Colonel?
there should be. Yeah, there should be. I think the Philippine National Police is going to make a manual on this new bionormal. And I would like to suggest that PPE should be a must in all the crime scenes because all crime scene has blood and biological evidence.
Okay, so thank you po. There's another question here, Colonel. We have different crime labs in every region. May I ask po yung regulatory body na nag-assure po ng all work and results are in quality or ayon po sa standard? Like for example, ISO 17025.
Can you repeat that? I did not quite understand the question.
Colonel, we have different crime labs in every region. May I ask if there is a regulatory body that assures that all work processes are of quality and ayon po sa standard? Like for example, ISO po.
Yes, because the crime lab is ISO. Now, I think it's on. I'm not really quite sure now because before, during my time, when I was still young once, the headquarters was already ISO. Now the provincial and the regional offices, they have worked with a standard, and this one, there is quality because the forensic scientist has integrity in the examination. First and foremost, you will have to depend on the integrity of the examiner. Even if you are ISO, but the person itself has no integrity, he could change it. So, ang number one na importante sa crime laboratory is the integrity of the person. Yun. Kasi kahit anong gawin mo, kahit sabihin mong ito ang ISO, ito yung standard, he can follow. But he is the one who is examining it. So the integrity of that all lies on the examiner.
Thank you, Colonel. There's another question here. You mentioned that we do not have an evidence retention law. Any particular reason daw po why that is the case?
Because we do not have that. Actually, the Philippine law is patterned after the US because we do not have the Innocence Project. It's a big one. The Innocence Project is a project in the USA wherein those that were wrongly convicted, even in our country, we have people who are wrongly convicted. But how can they appeal when the evidence is nowhere to be found? So this one, I asked one of my friends who is a lawyer in the Supreme Court, and she told me, maybe you can lobby for evidence retention law. Because I wanted to really qualify and verify if we really do not have the evidence retention law. But that is very important for us. We should have the evidence retention law. Okay.
I think Sir Mark is now in. I'm turning you over to Sir Mark.
Okay.
Sir Mark.
Thank you very much, Sir Oliver, for taking over. So unfortunately, there was a technical difficulty. So we have questions here from the chat box. So this is a question from Pritziline Dakilia. Ma'am, if an investigator gets sick due to exposure, is he or she insured or covered for hospitalization or treatment?
Generally, the police officer, we have hospitals in the camp, so you will be treated there, right? And then generally, I do not know with the law enforcement, but with the crime laboratory, they have the hazard pay. Because before the crime laboratory personnel in the early days has no hazard pay, but due to this exposure to chemicals, bacteria, even we have some zoonotic diseases, yung galing sa mga animals, so birds, ganon. Nag-ano ng hazard pay, na merong hazard pay, ang mga especially the SOCO people, they have hazard pay. And hazard pay is 50% of their base pay. So depending on your rank, that is the hazard pay.
Wow. Wow, sana all, no?
Yun. Kaya kung ang ranko mo, colonel, tapos tumatanggap ka ng 500,000 a month, di 250,000 a month ang hazard pay mo. Yun. Pero wala namang colonel na 500,000. Kahit nga yung 4-star general. At least pag nag-usap tayo, kailangan malaki para masaya.
All right. We have also additional questions. I think these two are similar. The first one is from Christian Lar Lagua. I-incinerate po ba yung evidence before disposal? And another one was from Sir Mark Kevin Cordero. The question is, in regards to the evidence retention, how do we dispose of the physical evidences like murder weapons or evidences other than biological evidence?
As far as I can remember, these physical evidence like the knife, it is still in the laboratory. we have transferred, the laboratory has a big, has a new building in Bicutan for the evidence, because there are, and then in the regions, there are also evidence. I remember when I was in Quezon City, we apprehended what they call this drug laboratory, and the whole station 10 was filled with the drugs that we apprehended because of lack of evidence room. So there are so many things that our country is what they call this is still not young, but has overlooked.
All right. So hopefully, those problems in
Yeah.
disposal
There
of
are some,
physical evidences will soon be resolved, by
there are
our.
some law enforcers who are listening. So I hope, this is one of this has been our age-old, century-old problem, where to store the evidence. How long will the evidence be stored? It depends. Yung retention, how many days, it's not days. The retention of the evidence is not days. You can only dispose the evidence if what we do here is if the case has been adjudicated. So, minsan yung we just leave a file of the report, and then the evidence usually, if the court asked for it, it is submitted in court. So I do not know how because you show to you show to court the evidence that you examine, so you leave it in court. Or if the court will tell you, you bring it, then you bring it back to the laboratory, and it stays in the laboratory until such time. But we do not have really a law on how long we will have to keep this evidence.
All right. So I guess that also answers the question coming from another participant, Miss Pauline and Jennifer. Now, the question she had was, what is the retention period for infectious evidences? So I guess the statement earlier was able to answer that particular question. So I guess we have to entertain the next question from Ma'am Lord Delisa Sejes. The question is, Ma'am, question po, for crime scene processing in the new normal, in terms of biosafety, should be observed in all types of crime scenes? Once again, ma'am, question po for crime scene.
Yes. Right? Yes. Especially now, the crime scene responders should be wearing PPE. They have to have shoe cover. They have to have the mask. Now, if there is no ventilation, there should be respirator. So this one will put a really big dent on the budget. But if, of course, we wanted to help the people, because in the crime scene investigator, how do the investigator listen to the complaint of the dead? By finding the evidence. So, but we have to protect also our investigators. Ganon.
Yes, definitely, ma'am.
Yes.
We need to really protect our frontliners, particularly our first responders, our law enforcers. Another question coming from our participants is, this is slightly interesting, no? Paano daw po pumasok sa SOCO? May hiring po ba?
Number one, dapat, usually ang member ng scene of the crime is a police officer. So you have to be a police officer. There are qualifications for police officer. So you have to be a college graduate. Now, if you are a medical technologist, if you have, or a criminologist, if you are lucky, there is the lateral entry. The lateral entry means that when you apply, and you are accepted for lateral entry, then you are an officer at once. Then you hold the rank of a lieutenant. Then you will have training as police, because you are police. So ganun yan.
All right. So also, Colonel, I'd like to ask now from our participants who are outside. Now they have questions posted on the link that we have provided earlier.
Okay.
The question from one of our participants viewing the Facebook live during
Mm-hmm.
during a crime scene investigation. Does your institution practice proper wearing of PPE? What needs to be done in order to address the lack or shortage in PPE?
The hierarchy of the Philippine National Police is doing now, because of the new normal, and this seminar of ours is also very timely. So they are doing everything because PPE is very, even you say it's cheap, but you have to change the PPE in every crime scene. During my time, I respond to 5 crime scenes a day. So if there are 5 in your team times 5, that would be the number of PPE that you will use plus the shoe cover plus everything. So it will have to have a dent in the budget. So there is no budget as of now for PPE, but there is a budget for gloves, the universal rule. There is no budget yet for the universal precaution.
All right, so hopefully the higher administration of PNP would be able to provide for the full PPE of our law enforcers. Now,
Yeah.
this time, we have also a similar question from our viewer, Facebook live viewer. Since crime investigators are not wearing PPEs, how do the authorities ensure that the evidences will retain its integrity and not affect the result of the case?
If you are a crime scene responder or a crime scene investigator, the evidence that you collect, you value it like gold or diamond, because that evidence involves your integrity. If you lose that, you will have a case. You can either be dismissed. You will be in violation of Presidential Decree 1829. That is obstruction of justice because you lost the evidence. And the number 2 there is dismissal. So they value more the investigators, the forensic scientists. They value the evidence. The evidence will have social distancing. They are not mixed one from the other, even if they came from the same crime scene. They maintain the integrity. That's why they forgot about their safety. But they do not forget how to protect the evidence.
We have a lot of questions actually coming up, but for the interest of time, we're going to just select our last 2 questions. And second to the last question is from our Facebook Live viewer. Similar to the question that we had earlier, the question is, how can medtechs work in a forensic lab? Do we need to take a forensic course?
Number 1, I am a medical technologist. We have a lot of medical technologists in the crime laboratory. So some of them are officers. Most of our medical technologists now holds the rank of a colonel. Now, when you are new, of course you will have training. You will be trained as a police officer, then you will eat humble pie, and then that's the time you will train for forensics, because forensic is not taught in school, right? As a medical technologist, do you know how to do the things that are being done? No. So you learn it there, or you do something that it should be, this is our way, then you present it. If they agree, then it's adopted. Like drug testing. Before, we don't have drug testing. It was the Philippine Constabulary Island Philippine National Police that started drug testing. So how was it started? It was started by a medical technologist. That's how it is.
And
next question.
this question actually is similar to the second to the last question. It says, tanong ko lang po kung paano po yung transition ninyo from medtech to forensic. Are there other courses or subjects that you took to land into forensic?
None. I just, kasi number one, if you like forensic or if you like molecular biology, which is my second love, or if you like blood, now you have to like your work to do it better. You just don't go into something that you are not interested. So, number one, kailangan may interest ka eh. Kagaya ko, nung bata ako, gusto ko yung medical legal. Gusto ko si Lagalag. Gusto ko si Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So, tapos yun. And then, ang medtechs before, mahirap paghanap ng trabaho. And then, when I was with Crime Lab, I do autopsies. And then my boss was good, Colonel Moraleda. So he was discussing, he's the pathologist, he was discussing to me, and then he listens to my recommendations. And then it was developed later on. Ganon. Then you have to study, of course. Pero walang special study. Pero ngayon, yung mga medtechs, they will have to learn how to do blood spatter, detoxification of the dugo that will help solve the crime. Ay, sabi ni Dr. Moreno, si Quincy ME, bata pa ako yung doc, grabe ka.
We're not even familiar of it.
Yes, Quincy, medical examiner show on Channel 7.
Yeah, yun sa amin naman, mga NCIS.
Ganun?
Palabas na napapanood ng newer generation. But before we end this particular question and answer portion, Doc, meron kasing additional question dito na interesting din, no? Kung mamarapatin ninyong sagutin. What happens to the crime scene after investigation? Who is responsible for decluttering the area?
Decluttering.
Yes.
When the investigator in our country, we have a very odd way of doing crime scene, because when you respond to crime scene, you have to do your best, get the evidence and everything there. You have the search. Remember, it's a legal search, so you have to look for all the evidence, because once you leave the crime scene, you cannot return anymore. You give it back to the whoever lives in the house. In other countries, in Europe, in Finland, if there is a crime scene, the one who is living there is asked to look for another place to stay. They cannot go back to that crime scene unless the investigator has released it and they don't need it anymore. Kaya dito sa atin, I usually say, you have to do your best because you can do it only once. But in other countries, when they hold on to the house, mayroon yan. Tapos mayroong crime scene yan. So, aalis yung nakatira doon para kung yung investigator may problema, babalik sila doon and examine it well. Ganon.
All right. Thank you very much, Colonel Filipinas Papa, for that very interesting topic that you shared with us for tonight. Guys, a round of virtual applause, please, for those who know how to react by applauding. Please do so to our speaker, the lovely, the very beautiful Colonel Filipinas Papa. All right.
That's a mutual admiration club.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much, Colonel. And before we end this webinar, allow me to provide a short synthesis of the webinar discussion. Our guest speaker started by providing the legal definition of crime, which is a behavior or an activity in violation of the legal code. Thus, enforcers conduct a crime scene search to investigate. Therefore, a crime scene search must be planned, coordinated, and the legality must be ensured. In order to locate physical evidences, evidence was defined by our speaker as the means by which disputed facts are proven to be true or untrue in any trial before a court of law or any agency that functions like a court. Evidence originates from contact between people, objects, and both people and objects. There are different types of evidences identified earlier, which includes physical evidence, labile, biological, factual, and documentation. An area of concern, of course, and was highlighted was the biological evidences. Also discussed were the government regulations towards the fulfillment of a safe workplace, amongst which identified was the Philippine Occupational Safety and Health Standards. Under Rule 1013, a workplace is considered hazardous when workers are exposed to biological agents such as bacteria, fungi, viruses, protozoas, nematodes, and other parasites. Thus, PPE must be utilized. But PPE should not be limited to protective clothing, helmets, gloves, and other garments or equipment must be used and provided. These PPE are designed to protect the wearer's body from both injury and, of course, infection. Also mentioned in the guidelines were from OSHA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, clearly stating, of course, the universal precautions, which is, of course, an approach to infection control to treat all human blood and certain human body fluids as if they were known to be infectious with HIV, hepatitis B, and other bloodborne pathogens. Even dried blood and other dry materials poses threat to our law enforcers and should be assumed to be unsafe. Thus, PPE should be used when handling these items. Aerosolized pathogen also exposes our law enforcers to biological agent. Aerosolization occurs when a person sneezes, coughs, exhales, vomits, speaks, even when urinating, particularly among men, during hand washing, during flushing of the toilet, and during brushing of the teeth. Sabi nga nung isang participant natin, the word of the night is talsication. When collecting evidence, according to the speaker, retention must be considered. Safe handling includes, of course, the use of PPE and the management of spills or accidents, and proper waste disposal must be considered. Guidelines for packaging and storing of the evidence should outline the appropriate conditions for storage and how the biological evidence should be packaged to maintain its integrity. Also, chain of custody was mentioned, and tracking now was also emphasized. Also, best practices for disposing of biological evidence must be carried out once retention is no longer required by law. Ultimately, beyond our duties and responsibilities, safety should always be a priority. Once again, thank you very much to our speaker, Colonel Filipinas Papa. I know everybody's excited to claim their certificates, so let me share to you the procedures for claiming. So all you have to do is answer the webinar post evaluation and post test using the link to be flashed on the succeeding slide. Double check your email address and full name before submitting your post test. We will not be liable for any misspelled and miskeyed email address and full name. You need to garner at least 60% in the post test in order to merit an e-certificate with a single attempt. The e-certificate will be sent to your registered email address within 5 working days. And remember, the link will only be open for the next 30 minutes. There are questions in our Facebook Live asking if those who are watching Facebook Live could also avail of the webinar certificates. Yes, you just simply have to visit the link that will be provided later. All good things, however, must come to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, we have come to the end part of the webinar. Hopefully, the webinar will be beneficial for everybody. To end, I'd like to share a quote from Morgan Harper Nichols. When you start to feel like things should have been better this year, remember that mountains and valleys that got you here. They were not accidents, and those moments weren't in vain. You are not the same. You have grown and you are growing. You are breathing and you are living. You are wrapped in endless, boundless grace. And all things will get better. There is more than you than yesterday. On behalf of the BRAP Webinar Organizing Committee headed by Dr. Martin Miguel Moreno, Sir Ronnie Puno, Ma'am Laila Lani Florento, Sir Oliver Shane Dumawal, this has been Mark Raymond Nava, your host and moderator, saying it has been a privilege. And once again, thank you and have a wonderful evening. All right, I know everybody's experiencing so much stress right now for not being able to access our post evaluation and post test. We did not also expected this, but because due to the overwhelming response that you had, between your 4,000 participants are trying to access the said site, no, Blockbuster, pasensya na po. And so, because of that, no, we are extending, no, the duration of the post test. No? The lag that we experienced earlier is due to the massive number of people accessing the form. So you may try again at a later time. Now, we are once again extending the duration of your access for the post test. So later, please try to access the said site. Thank you very much for your understanding. Once again, we apologize for this technical difficulty. So ladies and gentlemen, we have an update from our organizing committee, and we have extended the post-test sites. So we now have 3 sites available for everybody. So you can visit or log on to https://tiny.cc/brappamet7. And we also have brappamet7a and brappamet 7b. Once again, we apologize for the technical difficulties you encountered in answering our post-evaluation and post-test. This is due to the surge of people accessing our initial post-test site. So we are also extending the access duration for these particular post-test. Thank you very much for bearing with this technical difficulty. Pasensya na po sa mga na-stress, pasensya na po sa mga naiyak, sa mga na-late po sa duty, yung mga nagme-message po. Please bear with us. No? And we have already people who are finished with their post-evaluation. So I guess we have solved the traffic. Meron na tayong 300. May EDSA, meron na ring C5, at saka may diversion road pa. All right, so we have BRAP PAMIT 7, BRAP PAMIT 7A, and BRAP PAMIT 7B. So I guess the people are already accessing the post-test sites. Now, if you have queries, please post on the chat box and we will be willing to forward your concerns to our organizing committee. Once again, thank you very much. And we apologize for the technical difficulty. Good evening, and we once again would like to ask your apologies for this technical problem that many are encountering. So we have extended our post-test submission or deadline, and the post-test will be open until 12 midnight tonight. Our apologies once again for this unforeseen technical problem. Once again, we have extended our post test until 12 midnight tonight. And also, once again, our apologies for this unforeseen technical problem. I'd like to also suggest to everybody to visit the alternative links, no? BRAP 7, PAMIT 7A and BRAP PAMIT 7B. Now, people have easier access to those particular alternative links as compared to the first link that we have provided. But we're very glad that many of you have already finished answering the post test. I'm sure it's very difficult for some, particularly for those who are not very attentive. No? But then again, we have extended our post test link, the deadline of our post test link until 12 midnight tonight. Once again, we apologize for this unforeseen technical problem. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.